Welcome to week 12. Only 2 more weeks left, man, of the college fantasy football season. This is the Sideline Podcast. My name is Kevin Showalter, my co-host Jared Booker. We are so excited that you guys are joining us here this evening. Not too many games left. We are watching the Kansas BYU game. Promise we're not people. The fine people out there probably think we're like BYU homers. They just always seem to play late. So this is our time to podcast and go live, and then they just always are playing. So thanks for joining us today. Follow us on X at Sideline FF Pod if you haven't done that already. We try and post things throughout the week on a fantasy football content, and Booker is always running wild in the comments section, which coaches should get fired, and roasting. I think today he went out after like a 350-pound left tackle. So best of luck to you in that fight. I gave you 30,000 to 1 odds, and yeah, as I mentioned, I think that was probably favorable than it should be. So yeah, today we're going to be going over kind of matchups from today and talk playoffs. This was week 1 of college fantasy football playoffs. We'll go over top performers. Booker is in the playoffs. My team is not, so I'm watching and cheering him on. And yeah, we'll look forward to next week, give you guys some advice or thoughts on matchups for next week. So if you do have any questions you won your matchup today, start questions for next week, go ahead and leave us a comment on YouTube or on X, and we will try and answer that later in the show. So without further ado, if this is your first time, we like to start out with a little bit of trivia. So I believe Booker's got some questions for us. So yeah, fire away on your trivia questions. Why Tennessee?
All right. Yes. Welcome everyone to the Sideline Podcast. As Kevin said, we do like to start every episode with some trivia, and for the most part, I am in charge of coming up with the trivia questions, and it's actually far more challenging than I ever thought it would be, because you can really get into the weeds. So hopefully I didn't go too far into the weeds. So here we go. First question. Kevin, which college football rivalry is known as the game? Is it A, Michigan versus Ohio State, B, Auburn versus Alabama, C, Texas versus Oklahoma, or D, Army versus Navy?
See, the funny thing is, again, we might have 26 Russian bots. We might have 27 Russian bots. A couple weeks ago, he was giving me some stuff from like 1912 leather helmets, and I was like, come on, man, give me something. Now, this one's the opposite. This is way too easy. This is A, Michigan versus Ohio State. I have a pulse. I'm an alive, breathing college football fan. So hopefully this next one's a little bit harder. But, yeah, thank you for the layup this week. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. That was a little underhand for you, a little slow pitch. Hopefully this one is a little bit harder for you. So, all right. There's so much Heisman trophy talk as we come to the end of the season. Should it be G&T, Travis Hunter or Dylan Gabriel? And if you've been following our podcast or any of our posts on X at all, you know that at least I am a G&T truther. I think that he should take it. But this question is, who was the first freshman to win the Heisman Trophy? And Kevin, it actually kind of looks like you're looking down, like you're potentially Googling this. I just want to.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing. No, I was just trying to post on X. But yeah, I am.
Sure.
That would be where I have to win. I need to know. I'm listening. Yeah. So it's very.
No, you're okay. You're just fine. Is it A, Jameis Winston, B, Lamar Jackson, C, Johnny Manziel, or D, Reggie Bush?
Lamar Jackson didn't win the Heisman. Did he win the Heisman?
I don't know. You tell me.
I mean, surely all of these guys have won the Heisman. Yeah, he won the Heisman. And I'm like, Lamar at Louisville, did he win? I don't remember Lamar winning the Heisman. It's Johnny Manziel or it's Reggie Bush. I just like the Heisman with Reggie got taken, but was he a freshman? It's got to be C. Johnny Manziel is what I'm leaning towards. The freshman season, the hype. Yeah, there wasn't. I wasn't an A&M fan, but that was an awesome college football season. So I'm going to go C. Johnny Manziel.
You're absolutely correct. It is Johnny Manziel. So he was the first freshman, and then the following year, actually, Jameis Winston was the second freshman to win the Heisman Trophy. So, and all of these guys did, in fact, win the Heisman Trophy. It was just at different times. And so thank you for joining us for TSP Trivia. Kevin was 2 for 2 this week, so I'll have to make it a little more challenging next week.
All right. Just posting again. If anybody has any questions for your weeks, you won this week, and we're going to get to that towards the second half of the show. Looking forward to next week. Kind of give Booker some tips on who we think is going to be the must starts on his lineup, but also for you guys what matchups are coming. I know one person in our league today was talking about how, oh no, my best quarterback, my best running back is not playing this week, and that's kind of part of college fantasy football. It's just a wild, the scheduling, the bye weeks. Like, you got to be thinking about these things all the time. So we've been talking matchups for playoffs, both on here and also in text messages with Booker and I. Just again, this is a big part of fantasy football. Is what are your playoff matchups? In my NFL team, I'm already looking at like, okay, if I play this guy in the playoffs, who's a wide receiver that could be favorably matched up for that? Because we love it, and so we get a little crazy with it. So anyway, all right, moving along, we're gonna go game recaps. So let's start off. I don't know if this was the game of the day, but certainly 2 top 25 matchups: Missouri versus South Carolina. And how about I'll break down this one, then if you want to take the next one. But yeah, Lenore Sellers, freshman, 5 touchdowns. Great day for him. Let's see here. Who else? Luther Burden had a good day, 8 for 69 and a touchdown. One thing of note, when you see South Carolina score this many points, we've been pretty high on Rocket Sanders the last couple weeks. And this isn't I'm not about to trash Rocket Sanders because he's amazing. You hope if they score that many points that he has a little bit better of the day. He did salvage it with a passing touchdown or a reception for a touchdown. Don't know if I have his final points in front of me. Let me check here. Yeah, I don't have that in front of me. So it was an okay day for him, but I know he's had a couple big weeks as of late. But yeah, if South Carolina is scoring 34 points, you'd think Rocket Sanders went off. That wasn't the case. As we've talked about, Lenore Sellers is a phenom and really only should get better. I mean, back to your Heisman talk, I think he's going to put himself in that conversation next year. We'll see if they can have enough team success to be relevant in the media. But yeah, any other thoughts from this day? It was good to see Nick Harbor. I know he's on your team, 2 for 69 and a touchdown. Any other noteworthy performers that you wanted to mention in this game?
Well, I mean, just shout out to Lenora Sellers. You're absolutely right. I mean, I think he's going to be in the Heisman discussion. And I'm very impressed with South Carolina. I saw a post on X earlier today that said, like, the biggest lie that the media has, made you believe is that South Carolina is a decent team. And I was like, what is going on? I feel like on the defensive side of the ball, they've got some studs. And then on the offensive side, they've got some young, solid players. I do have Nick Harbor on my fantasy team. And last year he hardly did anything, and it just seems over the past couple games he has they've thrown the ball to him on some deeper routes, and he's had a couple touchdowns, which has been great. I also picked up Joshua Simon, one of the tight ends for South Carolina, a couple weeks ago, and he's been just a solid performer. He's one of the reasons I'm actually in the playoffs and leading this week. He's put up some solid numbers, and so I think South Carolina is actually pretty darn good. Missouri, I'm kind of surprised with how much they're struggling, quite honestly. But yeah, good game. Came down to the wire. Rocket Sanders scored with, I think it was like 15 seconds left, and so it was an extremely exciting finish. And I don't know. I've been to a game there at South Carolina. And it's an electric field or a stadium to watch football in. So yeah.
One other thing of note, I think these two teams are good examples of, like, if Missouri or South Carolina was in the Big 12 or the ACC, like, they would probably be winning those conferences where they get kind of swallowed into that middle void of the SEC because the top teams are so good that it's hard to compete. I mean, even what we saw tonight, Georgia, Tennessee, both teams are great, but it's hard. It's hard to go undefeated. It's hard to have one loss in the SEC, and yeah, just is what it is. So, all right, let's go on. You kick us off here on Florida versus LSU.
All right. Well, everyone, I learned last week about the magic of banners that scroll across the bottom of a live stream, and so I've got a special banner for our LSU Tigers.
Can't wait.
Here we go.
He was good.
So I watched this game, and I've been on Billy Napier's case for Florida all season, and because I've been more invested with the start of this podcast, and I mean, I've always watched college football and absolutely loved it, but as far as getting into the weeds, I've been kind of calling for his head pretty often early on in the season. Watching them play today against LSU, and this is like, I do not think LSU lives up to the hype. I think that this is definitely a down year. I don't know that Brian Kelly is going to make it another year. But Billy Napier's team, those Florida boys, they have some heart. Like, they've really taken some hits, and people have hated on them, including myself. But it's really a tale of the freshmen for both teams. With Florida coming out on top. You have DJ Lagway. I was watching the game where he got hurt and actually had to, I think it was 2 weeks ago, he had to leave the game on a cart. And I was like, oh man, I've got him on my fantasy team. I'm pretty torn up that I drafted him first, and I think he's got a pretty serious injury. Turns out it wasn't as serious as we thought, which I'm really thankful for. But he played well today. He was 13 for 26 for 226 and 1. But I don't know that those numbers really tell the story. Honestly, he had some incredible passes in some really important times of the game. So I was very impressed with that. And then Jaden Ball, I also have him on my fantasy roster as well. True freshman for Florida, running back, 6 for 65 and 1. One of those was a giant chunk play of 55 yards, but it kind of sealed the game for Florida. And so very impressed with Florida. I mean, they're in the SEC and they're playing their hearts out. So I'm going to pull for Napier. I've never pulled for Florida in my life. I'm going to pull for Napier. As far as LSU goes, Garrett Nussmeier, I mean, he is a stud, but he went 27 for 47 for 260 and 1. I mean, just kind of an average game. Caden Durham, another freshman running back for LSU, 20 carries for 91 yards. They've really turned the ball over to him in that backfield, and he's done a great job with it. As far as receiving, Aaron Anderson, he had 7 for 72 and 1. Playing very well. So I think overall, my thoughts on the game, you didn't win or lose your fantasy week based on what happened in that game. But it was a tight game. it was more competitive than I thought it was going to be. I thought LSU was going to run away with that. They did not, and the swamp was rocking, and I'm not entirely sure how long. I saw another post on X that the only reason why Brian Kelly may make it another year is because they have that really high end. I forgot the name of that quarterback recruit. I'm going to look it up real quick.
Yeah. While you're looking
Bryce Underwood. Yeah, Bryce
okay.
Underwood. So that's the only reason, because he got him to come. It's the only reason he's got another year in him. So do you have any other thoughts on that game from what you saw?
Yeah. What I was going to say, I mean, again, we're not trying to be a which coach should get fired show. But it is interesting. Both of these coaches get a lot of heat, and I think it's in part because their fan bases are so passionate. That was one of my questions before this was, should Napier keep his job in our pre-show banter? And I know you had said, yeah, the athletic director came out, reassured him, but I mean, to me, I'm like, that stuff happens all the time. Like, yeah, he's our guy, and then he loses to Florida State the last week of the year. They look terrible and give him the axe. That being said, it's hard to coach bad players, but especially in the day and age of NIL, recruiting and getting high quality players is like a big deal. And so I don't know how good of a coach Napier is, X's and O's. Like, is it he hasn't had the talent, or is it he's had good talent and he hasn't maximized them? I haven't followed Florida closely enough to know that. That being said, this Lagway kid is a stud. Like, Ball is a stud. So he's bringing in super high quality talent, and so to me, that warrants giving him another year to see if he can take Lagway and Ball and hopefully even more recruits to the next level. Fun fact for you, and I know we talked about this way back in probably August. You had the 3rd overall pick in our Campus Canton draft, our rookie draft in Campus Canton, which in Campus Canton, a rookie draft is 18-year-olds out of high school going into college. Other dynasty formats, you're taking your first round picks are usually guys going into the NFL. So that's one slight difference. So, I don't put too much stock into high school stats because it's hard. There's a lot that goes into that, especially for quarterbacks. Some schools, high schools, they don't throw the ball. And so the quarterback might not have good stats, but they're good. Lagway, on the other hand, is a whole different animal. This guy's got 74 touchdowns his senior year of high school, threw for 4,600, ran for 957 yards. So this guy's a monster, quite the specimen of a player. And I know you were like having some – it was almost an easy spot for you because we knew Jeremiah Smith was going to go high. We knew, I think, Raiola went. And then you're like, hey, I take the best of Raiola and Lagway. Either way I win, And so I think you're a lucky man. You got an absolute winner. And, I think that the sky is the limit for him. Nothing else of note. Obviously, the internet is abuzz with Brian Kelly's stuff right now, and I'm sure he's getting just memed like nobody's business. But yeah, LSU. I mean, I don't know. Coming into the season, do we know LSU's preseason rank? College.
I don't. I feel like it was.
I feel like they didn't have a whole lot of expectations, but then they kind of played themselves into expectations. That's currently now. Okay, they were ranked 13, so like medium level expectations. Typical SEC type of thing. I think they had a couple big wins early, and people are like, "Oh man, this team can go." But yeah, it feels like Kelly, as a coach, just those Notre Dame teams were good. Are they going to win championships? I don't know. So anyway, let's keep it moving here, not to get too far in the weeds with that. So moving on, and I am just going to do one thing here. Excuse me, folks. There we go. Okay, so Tennessee versus Georgia. This one is near and dear to your heart. I posted a poll beforehand, and it was kind of not that I thought I wouldn't have bet money. We're not betting men, but if we were, I wouldn't have bet money on Carson Beck before this game to score higher than Nico. That being said, it felt like everybody was going to be on the Nico train because of how bad Beck has been playing lately, and it wasn't a spectacular game for Beck, but it was what we're expecting: 340 yards, 2 touchdowns, efficient offense, running the ball. I know early, and this is a question for you: has it been bad Beck, or is it his wide receivers are catching the ball? I know Herb Street was talking about this a lot during the broadcast. Like I think they've dropped more passes than any other team in college football this season. Quote, check me on that. Community notes. But pretty sure they've dropped more passes, and it was on full display early. Like he was putting like pretty good balls out there, and they were not bringing them in. So that has me thinking. Like, I mean, he's thrown a couple games as of late with just way too many interceptions and questionable decisions. But yeah, that poll, I think I'll post the results later. But clear win for Beck on that one. And it was like fumble-itis early. Arian Smith had one. I think it was Delp had a fumble. They recovered them, but it was just like some sloppy game early. Dylan Sampson, he's been just an absolute stud for your team and many others throughout this year. Just showed up when you need him most in the playoffs. I know as fantasy football players, this is the time when people get the most frustrated with their players because your guys don't show up when you really need them the most. So you got to appreciate when a guy shows up in the playoffs, first round, 101 yards, a touchdown, 2 catches, 13 yards, like just a good quality, solid game for him. Nico, a little bit of a disappointing outing. And he's only a freshman. You probably have guys on your team that you're not only relying on Nico. I know we play best ball. But if you started him, then you're obviously pretty disappointed about that. Any other notes in this game on your side?
So you asked the question earlier if I thought that it was more back or more like wide receivers dropping the ball. I think it's both. I think last year having Brock Bowers and Lad McConkey, I think the margin of error was wide, and he still has some studs on that offense, but those two guys are elite. But I also think that Carson Beck has not played to the level that everyone expected. So as you said, this game is near and dear to my heart. I am a Tennessee Vols fan. I told Kevin before we started that I was not thinking that they would probably beat Georgia today. Georgia coming off the loss last week, playing for their playoff lives, at home, at night. I just thought it was a recipe for a Georgia Bulldog win, and that is what ended up happening. I did notice one thing. Squirrel White, Nico threw the ball to Squirrel White a bit more tonight than he has. I think he had the most targets tonight for any Tennessee wide receiver. And in the past, I feel like Brew McCoy and there was one other gentleman, Chris Brazel.
Oh yeah, Brazel.
Chris Brazel. And he's been getting his targets, but
Thornton's been kind of a disappointment all season, right? Like there was so much hype for him, and then just not really having the year I think that they had when he brought him in as a transfer. Score White is Mark Quavery. Yes, we're just torching that. Yeah. Sorry about that. Squirrel's so much easier.
We just call him Squirrel.
Yeah, he had 9 targets today, 6 last week, 2, 4, 6. So yeah, definitely an uptick on that. Good observation there as a tried and true Vols fan. So, all right, so we'll move along. These games aren't going to go full breakdown, mainly because they were really one-sided. But we'll just jump in here on the Ohio State and Penn State players. If you had any of these guys, you're probably pretty stoked. I'll start with a couple guys that I'm excited about, and I think had big games. If you want to touch base on any disappointments or just kind of letdowns, I can jump in on that too. So, Will Howard, good game, like solid game. You hope his yardage is a little high, but they didn't need to throw the ball in this game, so that's going to happen. We've talked about it before. Sometimes when there's a closer matchup, that game script is going to be in the favor of a quarterback to have to throw the ball more because, hey, they might get down 14 points and have to make a comeback, where when you're going to blow a team out, then you run the ball for 173 yards. So Judkins, 2 touchdowns. You're really happy about him. You're not so happy if you went against him. Jeremiah Smith, a good day, kind of quiet day, a quiet 4 for 100, 14 fantasy points. Just you're hoping for more just from what he's shown us earlier this season, but not a complete stinker. Carnell Tate, sort of out of nowhere. We were talking about him earlier today. 2 touchdowns. I know it was like early in that game, and you happen to be going against both of these guys. So I was like, what are the chances that you're going against Tate and Judkins this week? And they have 4 touchdowns between the two of them. He had a good game a couple weeks ago against Nebraska, 4 for 102, but he's had a pretty quiet season, mainly in the shadows of so much talent on that team. I think people forget how good of a player that Tate is, and that's just, some days it's going to be your day, and other days it's not. Penn State, Aller, big day for him. Wow, super. He had more touchdowns than incompletions. That's, I know the NFL, they've been blowing that out of the water with Jared Goff as of lately. But yeah, 17 for 19, 3 touchdowns, 247. Got you 22 rush yards as well. Big one of the day on that game was Tyler Warren. You don't often see a tight end leading the team in rushing and receiving from the tight end position, so truly incredible for him. He ended with, let me pull up that number, I believe it was 41 points. 43 points as a tight end. That's kind of a week winning. I mean, you've come to expect that from him because he's a top 5 tight end in the country. But you're really thrilled if you played him. You're not so thrilled if you went against him this week. So from those 2 games, those 2 teams, anybody that really disappointed this week that you're like, man, those fans are not going to be thrilled that player kind of left a dud or didn't score, that type of thing?
Well, not really. I mean, Trevion Henderson he actually had almost as many yards as Quinshon Judkins for Ohio State, but 4 less carries. So his average was better, but Quinshon got both of the touchdowns and Trevion did not get any. And Jeremiah Smith, you had mentioned that he had a bit of a quiet day at 4 for 100, which for him is quiet, but I did see that he had a touchdown called back. It was, you watch the thing in slow motion. It's a toss-up. And I wasn't watching it live, so I don't know if they originally called it a touchdown or an incompletion, but it ended up being an incompletion. So he would have had, that would have made you quite happy if they had went the other way on that. Carnell Tate, as you said, with 2 touchdowns, 4 for 52. I heard that he was from that area. They played at Wrigley Field in Chicago. And Carnell Tate is from that area, so he had a big homecoming. Your Tyler Warren, that's the big story of the Penn State Purdue game, and so I think I will come against the team that has Tyler Warren in the next week or 2, and so I'm hoping he doesn't have quite as big of a game.
It kind of always makes you happy when someone has a massive game the week before, because you're like, most likely the percentage says they're not going to do that again. And so obviously he has the talent to do that. They don't play Purdue every week, but I had a roast of Northwestern just like right there. I was ready to hit send. I got on them earlier this season of just that Mickey Mouse field that they were playing on. And I had something lined up where I was like, of course, Ohio State was like, give us give us a legit stadium so our fans can fill that place. We're not playing in some little Pee Wee field. That was beautiful Pee Wee field, right on the water, amazing view, but it had like 10,000 seats or something like that. So you knew that if Ohio State's coming to town, they're going to get a little better accommodations for those Buckeyes. One other thing of note, Ibuka is probably the biggest disappointment from like a top 20 player that let you down. I know those Ohio State running backs all year. You kind of know it's a two-headed monster, and you're just hoping that your guy is the one who scores. But Ibuka and Smith have been both eating throughout the year. But yeah, 2 for 25. That's not what you're hoping for in a playoff matchup. But again, it's fantasy football. Let's not be going crazy on people on X, because at the end of the day, we play this game for fun. We play it, and yeah, that's all I'll say on that. Just let's not trash players in the playoffs. It's a bummer when guys let you down. But again, people have real lives, and we play a fake fantasy football game with our teams. We do care deeply. Again, I care less at the moment because my team's not in the playoffs. So my son asked me maybe like 3 or 4 times a day, like, "Dad, how's your fantasy football team doing?" I'm like, "Stop it, son!" Like, anyway, Grandpa Booker, my kids call Booker Grandpa Booker, so that's why I just said that. All right, speaking of Booker, here we go. So we're going to go, this is kind of a little one-off. So why don't you just give us a breakdown of your playoff team, top performers, what stands out to you? Looks like you're going to win. Is that still – this would not age well if you are currently losing, but I believe you're going to win. Give us a little breakdown of some of your players and what stands out from your day today.
Absolutely. Yes, I am going to win. We are in a best ball league, and I'm going to win 259 at least. I've got about 31 more minutes of game time before the end. But my opponent is done at 240. So I will win. So congratulations to me. I will move on to the next round and run into a potential buzzsaw. So something that I was really pleasantly surprised to see, I've got Kyle Monangai on my team. He had 23 points today. That's not even really the story. The story is that he was even on the field. I'd read like an article that I watched the game against Pitt. I believe it was Pitt where he hit his head against the ground pretty hard, and he went into concussion protocol and missed last week. So the fact that he played today was awesome. And then he scored 23 points. Woody Marks with USC, 24 points. He's just been a solid performer for me. Like, I can count on at least 20 points from him every week. Same with Dylan Sampson. Someone that just blew my socks off today, I have Cam Coleman for Auburn. He had 8 receptions for 100 yards and 3 touchdowns. One of those touchdowns was a one-handed grab that was
sweet.
It was beautiful. It was beautiful. I also have Ryan Williams and Evan Stewart with Oregon. So I've got I had to trade. This is a campus to Canton league, so we're playing NFL and college. I had to trade some big pieces on my NFL team in order to get some of these studs that are on my college team, but that may be why I'm in the playoffs currently. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't be. A big pickup that I made, I had mentioned him earlier, a tight end for South Carolina, Joshua Simon. He had 4 for 76 and 1. He, over the past couple of weeks, he had 2 weeks ago, 31 points. Last week, 14 points, and today, 19 points. And so he's only been below 10 points as a tight end one time since October 12th. And so when it comes to tight ends, you can't really ask for more than that. I know that tight ends are a lot of it's the volatile position. It's really hit or miss. So pretty happy with that. Some guys that let me down. Let's see. I think my main letdown was probably Micah Bernard, running back for Utah. He had 20 rushing yards and 6 receptions for 22 yards, 10 points. I actually paid pretty heftily for him, if I can remember that trade correctly, because he was balling out, and so I was excited to have him. Another disappointment, Avery Johnson, quarterback for Kansas State, 2 interceptions, 258 passing yards, 1 rushing touchdown. But he only had 16 points, and so just not quite the game I wanted. And actually, one last shout out. Last night was our trade deadline, and at 11:15 p.m., I was texting Kevin here because I wanted to get my hands on Marcel Reed for Texas A&M. He was playing New Mexico State today, and I was like, I'm in the playoffs, and it's win or go home. I really want Marcel Reed, and so I ended up trading him with 45 minutes left in the trade deadline. I gave him Reuben Owens, who tore his ACL for Texas A&M this year, but he will probably come back next year and be an absolute animal. But I traded that upside for the points today, and he's a sophomore for Texas A&M. Took over from Connor Wakeman, put up 28.82 points, and so he was a huge contributor. I don't know that if I hadn't made that trade, I'd have to do the math, but if I hadn't made that trade, I'm not sure that I win today. And so it was close.
Yeah. I was looking at, I was like, man, if Cam Coleman, who hasn't done much this year, compared to other freshman phenoms, if he doesn't have that circus catch and you don't trade for Marcel Reed, you won by 19 points. So like if Coleman has a 20-point game, and again, in fantasy football, we can always do the what ifs, but it is crazy how many matchups come down to like small decisions. And that's why it eats at us, because we're like, oh man, if I would have just started this person, if I would have just made this deal. I think it's a great piece of wisdom there from Booker of, hey, if you have an option to make a trade or go for it, like go for it. There's, you might regret, oh man, I traded for a guy but just, I don't know, we play it to win. You play to give it your all, and so props to you for going after it. So all right, so we're going to move along to just fantasy football at large. We go through kind of our top performers on quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, and today we're going to touch on a little bit of tight ends. Then we'll get into some waiver wires, and we're going to finish up with looking forward to next week. So again, if you have any questions for your matchups next week, this is our one show. We're both have full-time jobs. Like we want to grow this, but for now, this is it. So we're going to cover next week. By the time we jump on here next week, those matchups will probably be over. So anyway, so let's start with our core. Oh, so what I was going to say there. So leave us some comments. If you have any questions, start. Hey, I don't know who your trade deadline is probably past, but next week you got your quarterfinals. Hey, who should I start? What should I do? Especially as we get into waivers. We post our waiver wires, oftentimes who's available in our league. It's a pretty competitive league, so there's not always massive rosters, so 42-man rosters. So usually if somebody's available in our league, they're probably available in your league. But if you have a scenario where, hey, I've got these 2 guys available, who would you like more? Shoot us a comment. Again, if you don't get it today on the live stream, feel free to reach out to us on X. I am TSP_Kevin, TSP_Booker, or Sideline FF Pod. Excuse me. Okay, so moving along here to quarterbacks. Where is it? There we go. So one thing that stood out to me is none of the top 20 quarterbacks are free agents. So that just kind of goes back to trust your studs, especially at the quarterback position. I feel like it's the easiest to, it's the most important. So there's very few guys that are just hanging out that are available and are going to perform well. So that is one thing of note. If your quarterback position is not already solidified, you're probably not going to find somebody on waivers that's going to jump in there and contribute right away. Big shock at the top for me anyway. Garrett Green, a lot of hype going into this year and just hasn't really performed, but a huge day on the ground for him. 129 yards. He's the only quarterback in the top 20 to break 100 yards on the ground. 2 touchdowns. We talked about this last week, but having that quarterback who can run the ball is a fantasy football cheat code, and you see that today. Did throw an interception, but 42.38 points. You are quite thrilled, especially in best ball, because if it's not best ball, I don't know if you start Garrett Green. With how they've been playing, it's been kind of a down year compared to expectations. You might have left him on your bench. So in our league, best ball, he slots right in there for you. Big game for Klubnik, 29.62. Really, that's inflated because he had, I believe it's only showing 41 yards, so he might have been in the negative when he broke that off, but I believe he broke off like a 50 or 55, 60-yard touchdown run to win this game. And so he must have been in the negative rushing at that point because he finished with 41 yards and a touchdown. This was an amazing game to watch with a lot of playoff, a lot of ACC implications. And so I was watching this game, and I don't have a dog in the fight, but I was very excited to see how this shakes out. So that stood out to me. Sawyer Robertson, he was on our waiver wire earlier this year. My team's not playing, but I'm really excited about him going forward. I think he comes back to Baylor for another season, and the kid can sling the pill. So 329, 3 touchdowns. He's been consistently over that 25, 30 point that you're looking for on your quarterback. And so how about you? Any other quarterbacks stand out or disappointments on the day from a quarterback perspective?
Well, I had Jalen Milroe. I think that he was he only played a single half. He did play well in that single half, but because they were playing Mercer, he ended up getting pulled at the beginning of the second half. And so kind of disappointing in that, like, hey, I'm in a playoff game and I have Jalen Milroe, and it would be, I mean, against Mercer, that guy could have 50 or 60 points. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. He ended up with 27.74 before the backups came in. One thing I did see on X, though, Austin Mack, he was at University of Washington last year and followed Kalen DeBoer over to Alabama. And I was seeing I didn't see him play. I wasn't watching that game. I'm not even sure it was televised, but I was seeing some Bama fans calling for him to be like the starter next year. And so just a little secret, if you have Austin Mack on your waiver wires, I don't know if he's showing up on the depth chart as the next man up, but apparently he had quite an impressive day. Other than that.
That being said, one question for you there. Is it absolutely certain that Jalen Milroe goes to the NFL next year? Athletically, yes, but I'm like, does he stay one more year, develop, kind of like the Michael Penix, like, hey, it could be from the perspective of like, hey, I want to chase championships, NIL money. Does he go in the first round? With all of the big quarterbacks this year, I think he does. I think he probably goes late first round if he does go out. But if he stays an extra year, develops with a great offensive mind, I hear Alabama fans, but I wouldn't be so sure that Milroe is 100% going to the NFL, just because hopefully he has good people around him saying, hey, develop as a player, as a leader, as a quarterback. That's only going to help your stock moving forward. But a lot of guys, it's like, hey, if you have that opportunity, they're going to take it. So, it'll be interesting to see. But what are your thoughts on that as Milroe? Is he a lock to go to the NFL, or is he, you could see him coming back?
I think it could go either way. If it wasn't for NIL, he would definitely be going to the NFL draft. I was looking here, though, he might be in a sweet spot. I think that if he really thinks about it, which I'm sure he's got a ton of people in his life that will be talking to him about this. I'm not sure as a stud quarterback, I feel like I would want to be more in the middle of the pack. You've got your Caleb Williams going to Chicago and just in the past couple of weeks, it's been a dumpster fire. So if he was going early in the first round, or if he improved his draft stock, you've got the Patriots at 3-7, but they've got Drake May. I'm not sure they're drafting him. The Raiders at 2-7, the Browns at 2-7, and the Jags at 2-8, Titans at 2-7. I mean, and the Jags have Trevor Lawrence. I'm not sure you want to be in that position to where you're the best quarterback that all the trashy teams want to pick you up if you want to have a successful career. So I think he probably goes, but I would absolutely love if he stuck around.
Yeah. All right. Very good. I did see, I believe it was in the Bama game. They had the elusive 4 quarterbacks played in that game, which is, you don't see that very often. Like even when you bring in the backups, but that 4 guys touched the ball, I thought was interesting for that one.
One last word on that game.
Yeah.
I don't even know the guy's name, but I saw a little highlight. Mercer there was a one-handed catch in the end zone that they had against Alabama. And so shout out to whoever you are on Mercer who had that highlight reel catch against Bama. So keep that ball.
That's right. All right, let's move along to running backs. So, man, one thing that stood out here is Louisville running backs. So, full disclosure, before the season, there were a couple of Louisville running backs, and I had my eye on them because I was like, Jawar Jordan last year was my diamond in the rough, and I was like, this is a school that I want to target their running backs. One problem this year is it seems like whoever's in there is having a good game, and it has been Isaac Brown. We've talked glowingly about him, and I think he is that dude on that team. But let me see what he finished with. But while I'm pulling that up, Duke Watson, 117 yards and 3 touchdowns. Again, this is a close competitive game, so I don't know for sure if Brown was hurt. But I did see he had a couple carries earlier in the game. I've got Kenjon Brown, who I was just trying to guess which of the Brown brothers were going to be the one. So it does show the red flag here with Isaac, shoulder downgraded out. So looks like he took a hit and is in a sling. So yeah, tough break for him, and that does make sense then why Duke Watson, he is not a free agent in our league, but a big game for him. So again, best ball, I don't even want to get into my disdain for best ball, but just a random guy that you would have never started get you 29.7 points. I digress. Quali Conley, I traded him away earlier this year. He had a couple good first weeks. It's good to see him sort of rebound, 107 yards and a touchdown. He's always been that PPR threat, 3 for 27 and a touchdown, 28.4. You were quite thrilled about that. Again, start your studs. That's pretty simple. A little bit of a spoiler. Kai Robichaux, we said, pick this guy up. If he's available, he should not be available. He was available, and shame on our own league. They're clearly not listening to this yet, but he was available again. Booker, I don't know why you didn't pick him up, man. Let's see, what do we have here? 22 points, 90 yards, 2 touchdowns. We said the 40 points wasn't going to happen every single week, but I'll take 22.7, 2 touchdowns in a run-heavy offense. Any other running backs that stood out to you or disappointments from the day? I hate to say disappointments, just underperformed expectations.
Yeah. Surprise for me. I had no idea that this individual even existed, but Bryson Washington for Baylor, he's rostered in our league. I had no idea that he was even on the radar, but the guy had 123 yards for 3 and 5 receptions for 59 yards and 1, and ended the day with 47.2 fantasy points. And so that is a wild day to have.
You want to know the craziest part about him? I looked this up.
Yeah, earlier. I do.
That was his second highest scoring week of the season. Last week, 47.8, 196, 4 touchdowns. So let me see when this guy was picked up in our league. Wow. Looks like he was, he was picked up before the season, and just been sitting on the bench. But yeah, he had 29 points against Texas Tech, 17 against Air Force. So like, he's had a couple games, but we've talked about it. Those Big 12 teams, especially in the playoffs, it's too late to make trades, but those Big 12 teams can score points. So I would not take them in a matchup against Georgia or any SEC team in the playoffs. But when they're playing each other, they're going to, everybody's going to eat. So not a shocker that a Baylor running back went wild, but yeah, definitely a shocker that as a freshman, 2 back-to-back 40-point weeks. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there. I just looked that up earlier, and I was like, dang, he did it last week too. So we must have missed that in our dialogue last week.
Yeah, no worries at all. That is, I don't know how we missed that, but if you have him, good on you. If you don't, I would absolutely go get him. Disappointment, Justice Haynes, stud running back for Alabama. It was probably just a game script thing. They're playing Mercer once again. Gosh, what did he have? 37 yards today, so 3.7 points. I mean, the amount of draft capital that you spent on that guy, if you had him in the playoffs this week, you probably were not super excited. And I know that because I had him in the playoffs this week, and I was not super excited. So,
yeah, sorry, go ahead. Finish up.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say one other thing. On a disappointment is 5 of the top 13 running backs were on bye this week. So that's a disappointment, not in any specific player, but that's a bummer that you trusted these guys all year long, like a Caleb Johnson, to name one. Who else do we have here? RJ Harvey was on bye, Darius Taylor, Taj Brooks, and Tutton from Virginia Tech. All of those guys have been on our top 10 rankings pretty much all year long. They're set it and forget it kind of players. So really a bummer that they had a bye in week 12 is not what you want to see. Any final thoughts on running backs before we move along?
Last little bit of disappointment, not to end on a bad note, but Phil Maffa, running back for Clemson, he had 17 yards today. Rostered 100% all over. He's had the past 5 weeks. I mean, he had 13 last week, but then 36 the prior week, 23 the week before that, and then 25 the week before that. So if you are not in a best ball league, you're probably starting that guy, and not super excited about that today either. So those are my final thoughts on running backs.
Yeah. All right, let's move along here to wide receivers. Why don't you kick us off with wide receivers? Who stood out, top performers? Yeah, I know you already mentioned Cam Coleman earlier, but who else on our top 10 to 20 here is really catching your eye?
So I think Emmett Mosley for Stanford. So actually the same guy in our league that has Bryson Washington for Baylor, the guy the running back that scored 47.2 points, he also has Emmett Mosley for Stanford, wide receiver, freshman, 48.5 points today. So on those 2 freshmen for teams that are not competing for anything, potentially a bowl game, almost 100 points. And so Mosley had 13 receptions for 168 and 3, and he's only rostered in 12% of leagues. So I don't know if that's maybe that's an outlier, but I don't have the numbers in front of me, but that's crazy to me. Antonio Williams for Clemson, I think. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was best ball rant. I need to let you finish. I'm just as you're mentioning there, I'm like freaking best ball.
Oh, another best ball rant.
Another best ball. Go ahead. I think that was rude of me.
Oh, you're good. I think Antonio Williams has for Clemson has stood out as the alpha for Clemson. I think he's had some good weeks. Sophomore, 39.9 points this week. Obviously, Clemson has Bryant Wesco, and then AJ. They got this absolute stud, 5-star. I think it's AJ something. Last year he committed, so he's a freshman this year. Absolute stud. I think people were pretty high on him. But I'm not sure he's having a great year. As I look at that, actually another guy that stood out to me, Draylon Miller for Colorado. I had him on my team earlier this year, and he just he wasn't doing anything. I wasn't sure he was going to get on the field. Today against Utah, he had 22.8 points, 6 for 108 and 1. I don't know, again, if that's an outlier. Some of these things you can't really trust unless people are producing week in and week out. But it was good to see. I mean, I'm not a Colorado fan, as maybe some of you know, but it was good to see him do well today. Yeah, what about you?
Yeah, you took the words out of my mouth on the Colorado Buffs. We made mention of it last week of 3 wide receivers in the top. I think it was the top 11 last week, but 3 again in the top 15. And the notable one missing is Travis Hunter. They did mention that after the game in a interview with Shador and Travis Hunter, like, oh man, I didn't target you the ball. I know Hunter got burned on a deep ball. Playing quarterback, so like he might have been tired or a little bit gassed. I know they would never admit that, but again, Hunter's a stud, so he's going to have his days. I think the offensive targets didn't go his way today, so that's probably, you're a little disappointed if you had him, but that definitely stood out. That still 3 Colorado wide receivers top 15 is impressive back to back weeks. Again, start your Big 12 guys. You can have confidence in that. A couple of things in our waiver wire. Again, this has been one of our favorite parts of the year, and honestly, something we've had pretty good success at. 2 of our waiver wire darlings, we'll call them. I know it was early on. We locked eyes on Jordan Tyson, of like, hey, this is a guy you want to get on your team. Hopefully, you listened in week maybe 2 or 3. I'd have to go back and look. But in the playoffs, 17 targets, 12 receptions, 176 yards, and 2 touchdowns. I mean, from a waiver wire pickup, like that is awesome to see. I also, it's cool to see Demir Miller. I know we had talked about last week, if Monangai comes back, is that going to dip his target share a little bit? He's here to stay, even in a game where Monangai had a good game rushing the ball. 11 targets, 8 receptions, 107 yards, 1 touchdown. So, again, we're usually putting people on our waiver wire stuff that we want to pick up or we would pick up. So we're drinking our own Kool-Aid, and those are the guys that stood out to me. Looking down through here.
As you look, I've got one other thing to say. If you want to keep looking,
yeah, jump in there.
So as I was rolling through these wide receivers, it's not necessarily what surprised me is not what I am seeing; it's what I'm not seeing. Let's see here: 18 on the week. Anthony Brown for Kentucky, sophomore wide receiver, 21.3 points. He had 3 for 51 and 2. In the top 20, though, there's no other names for Kentucky. They have Dane Key and Barryon Brown, who I think both are like NFL prospects. And I have actually not seen them on this list. Someone correct me if I'm wrong, but I've not seen them on this list for the past couple of weeks. Are they even having a good year? Because I know that I was trying to trade for Barryon Brown pretty early, and I'm actually kind of thankful I didn't at this point. So just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah. Travis Hunter finished 35, ranked 35, 17 points. Like we talked about with Jeremiah Smith, just kind of an off day for him. Finished a little lower than you would like. But yeah, no other major surprises, I would say, on that. All right, let's move along here to our tight ends just briefly. We already mentioned Tyler Warren. A couple other noteworthy performers. Max Clare for Purdue, 7 for 91 and a touchdown. One guy, a little teaser here for our free agents this week, not just because of one big week. We've talked about that. You don't want to just chase the points from one week, but I'm going to butcher this here. But Moliki Matavoa for UCLA, 7 for 68 and a touchdown, finishes the 4th tight end on the week, 23.3 points. It's not just a one-hit wonder. We're going to get into that in a few minutes, but I really like his performance today. I know you're happy about Nick Harbor showing up, but it's crazy the drop off in the top 10. You go from 43 points, 25 points, and then at 10, you're down to 15. So you're really excited if you have one of those stud tight ends. But even those guys, I know you traded for Loveland this week. which is, again, he didn't play this week, and he has the ability to score those 40-pointers, but he also has 6 different quarterbacks that could be throwing him the ball. So, like, you need multiple guys. I don't want to spend too much time on tight ends just because, again, we've talked about the volatility of the position. There is quite a few free agents, and we will get into that here. Oh, this one other thing, and then I'll hand it off to you. He did not make my waiver list, but he probably should have. Carson Ryan, tight end for Utah. 4 for 78. Not going to be someone that probably people go screaming to the waiver wire to get, but a savvy play for next year. Utah is a feeder for tight ends, both in the NFL and just, they do a lot of 12 personnel, a lot of 13 personnel, multiple tight ends on the field. So he's the type of guy that and again, I'm not able to target him now because of the way our setup is, but I'd be targeting him as an off-season target to say, hey, this guy's going to have a role next year. Nice to see him produce today. Hope Kuthi is all well. But, injury, next man up. So anything on tight ends before we move to waivers?
Three notes, 2 of them super quick. First one, Oscar Delp. I had him on my team earlier this year. He had a big game, 23.6 points today against Tennessee. Last week, 0. The week before that, 5.1. The week before that, 7.5. So if you have Oscar Delp, unless you're in best ball, he's probably sitting on your bench, and that's kind of disappointing. Also, something that stood out to me here, Penn State has 2 tight ends in the top 10. I think Tyler Warren was having such a day that they threw out Luke Reynolds, freshman, and he ended with 15.8 points, 3 for 53 and 1 just for kicks and giggles. So that's pretty cool. And then the last thing I want to highlight is I love seeing, so you mentioned Carson Ryan, and I have Nicholas Harbor. I love seeing that little comma in between the tight end position when there's another position that individual or that player can represent. So Nicholas Harbor is a wide receiver or tight end. So that's kind of like a cheat code. And then also, you might have to explain this to me a little bit. It looks like Carson Ryan on Fantrax is a running back and tight end. Did you see that?
I mean, it might be classified as a running back, but maybe he's more, they use him in like a fullback type role. Okay. But I mean, we saw the day leading carrier on Penn State was, their tight end. So I'm guessing that's more of a fullback, an old school fullback than a true, taking carries away from Bernard. But yeah, definitely interesting. And again, if your running backs have a down week and you have one of those guys with the dual fantasy citizenship, then that's bonus points for you. So, all right, let's move into waiver wire, and we should have like a cool jingle or something, but we don't. So, number 1 this week is Kai Robichaux, and sort of a we told you so. Hopefully you picked him up, and with all humility, 90 yards, 2 touchdowns. Again, he has great matchups on the horizon as well. So, highly recommend if he's still available. You haven't already picked him up, go ahead and do that. Next up is Roderick Daniels, SMU wide receiver. He had 4 for 79 and a touchdown today, 18 fantasy points. But again, we don't want to chase one-hit wonders. And I would say all of these guys are in that flex range. Other than Robichaux, I would say Robichaux has got some potential to like continue to give you close to starter level production because of the offense. The rest of these guys are a little bit of flex option flyers. As we've mentioned, they have good matchups for your playoffs is key. I wouldn't even, if it's between a guy with a tough matchup and not, I mean, be checking that. You have to scroll down to see who they have coming up, but that's a huge thing of creating those opportunities. So number 2, already said his name, Roderick Daniels, SMU wide receiver. He's over 11 points in 4 out of 5 weeks, over 18 in 2 out of the last 3. So a really nice floor and some upside to get you some points. SMU high volume offense, but kind of like we talked about with Colorado, a lot of mouths to feed. So, but I like his consistency over the last few weeks, and I think he could continue to produce in his upcoming matchups. Next, we got Montorio Foster for Michigan State. 6 for 76. I like his volume over the last week, and here comes Purdue. I mean, Purdue is what the doctor ordered if you need to score points. So this is kind of a little bit of a dart throw, but I see that Purdue on the schedule, and I'm like, sign me up for that guy. So if you're looking for a dart throw, you have a really tough matchup, and you need, hey, I need a team that's going to blow somebody out this week and score as many touchdowns as possible. Hopefully he catches 2 of them, and you have a great week. We mentioned it earlier, Maliki Mateveo, UCLA tight end, 19 points, at least 19.4 points in 2 out of 3 weeks. He's got USC this coming week, which is a good matchup for a tight end. So we like him. And last up is Johnny Daniels. Again, very similar things here, but over 13.8 points the last 2 weeks, coming off a bye. So he's probably not going to get, you can probably do a 0 bid and get this guy. But he's got a good matchup against Mizzou. Again, this is more of a flex option. He's not going to outscore your starting wide receivers. But if you're looking for somebody with some upside, a good matchup, I would definitely take a flyer on him. So let us know, again, if you have anybody in your league, hey, I got these 2 guys available, reach out. We'll give our input or our thoughts on it. Of those 5, who stands out to you the most that you'd say, hey, I'm going after this guy this week? And again, in our league, you can go after waivers. I can't because I'm not in the playoffs. So you only have 4 guys in competition for these players. So who are you going after this week?
If I needed to go after someone, I would probably go after Kai Robichaux. I think he's shown that has a consistent floor. But something to think about, unless you have an injury that happened today, if you're in the playoffs, I think you have a team that has it. So I wouldn't play with the formula too much. Unless you experience an injury today, or if you're just like going up against like a heavyweight next week and you're like, you know what, I need that home run hitter. So I feel like there's potential for Kai Robichaux. And actually for the one that we're going to keep slaughtering this name, but Maliki Mateveo for UCLA. I also like that. I did not even see him here until you had mentioned it, but he looks like pretty solid. And as you said, he has USC next week, and then Fresno State, I think, the week after that. And so if you're struggling at the tight end position and some of those other guys that we mentioned earlier are not available, that's not a bad pickup. I know I keep mentioning people, but Montorie Foster, it kind of seems like Aiden Childs has come on a little bit here, and he's got Purdue and then Rutgers. So I think Montorie Foster is a good pickup for especially if you're not in dynasty and you're just trying to win. You'll pick next year as well. Maybe you just need to drop someone for a home run. I feel like that's a good playoff schedule. So maybe Montorie Foster as well for Michigan State.
Yeah. Again, it's going to be very specific league to league on what you need, but give me a second. There's also playing defense in fantasy football of, hey, maybe the guy you're going against is a buzzsaw, but got a running back injury this week. Maybe you go a little harder after Robichaux. It's always in a trade and waivers, it's who are you giving up. So there is an element of, hey, I wouldn't give up a premium freshman for any of these guys. But, again, your matchup, your situation is really going to dictate how heavily you invest in any of these guys. These are flex options. Other than Robichaux, I think he is a good option. And again, like we said, pick him up. He's going to continue to get volume. And so, highly recommend that. So, all right. We're going to end it here. Last segment. Looking forward to next week. Semifinals. There should be 4 teams left unless you have a different setup. In our league, there'll be 4 teams left. So we're going to talk matchups. We'll kind of jump into the games and then specific players that you feel from that game. Right, book. So let's go. Let's start with Alabama versus Oklahoma. My tagline, I have like a little tagline on each of these. So my tagline on this is enjoy the Bama playoff ride, which is music to your ears. We were talking about the Bama. I think when you traded for Ryan Williams, I was like, this dude's going to eat in the playoffs because, and that was week 4 or 5, I think. It was early on that you traded for him. Bama's going to eat, and so if you have those guys, just continue to enjoy. It's been a little bit of a down year for Oklahoma, and I expect Alabama to continue to do Alabama things against an Oklahoma team that is riddled with injuries, and I think the advantage of like a Milroe in this game is he probably won't get pulled, and I think Oklahoma will keep it close enough to say, hey, we got to keep our starters in. We want to keep, but again, he got pulled in the first half and he got you 27 points. So like, I hear your complaints. If it was a close matchup and you needed those, you needed 35 out of him, you'd be like, come on, guys. But 27 points for a half day of work, that's not too bad for you. So anybody else in that matchup that you're looking forward to, or you think, hey, this is a person that's really going to have a big week?
I think that if I was not in a best ball league, I would be starting all of my Alabama players, and I would be sitting all of my Oklahoma players. And so I know that Alabama is not the defense that they once were, but I think Oklahoma is struggling enough to where in the playoffs, I'm not sure I would play that game. So
fair enough. Sorry, 1 second here. Just
you're all good. It looks like the second game you have on here that we're looking at is Auburn versus Texas A&M, and your tagline was that you're expecting an Auburn dip. What do you mean?
Well, it means they played UL Monroe today, and so I think Auburn has had quarterback trouble all year. They have had, I hope it's not. I hope it's not the case. But I wouldn't expect Cam Coleman to continue. I believe you had who's the name is, it's a hyphenated Smith.
Lambert Smith.
Smith had a good game. Like Auburn just feasted today. I think there's going to be a little bit of a dip against the A&M defense. So I would expect that game is at home for Auburn, but I don't think you're getting 39 points out of Cam Coleman next week. So just plan accordingly. And don't be so excited that, hey, Cam Coleman is, the clear-cut number 1 receiver, going forward. I mean, Texas A&M, Marcel Reed, I think he's going to keep doing his thing. Any other thoughts that you have in that game?
Last thought. Peyton Thorne was throwing the ball really well today. As you say, slinging the pill. He's been hit or miss. I think against Texas A&M, I know I made light of it earlier. Expect a dip. I expect a big dip. I don't think Auburn's going to pull that game out. I would not play Peyton Thorne unless you absolutely had to.
Correct. All right, so let's go Indiana versus Ohio State. This is, I don't know what time is this game going to be on next week. We've had so many games of the year. Like, we are truly 9 a.m. Come on. What's that doing on at 9 a.m.?
It's that Big Ten mess, man.
Are they going to flex that? It doesn't even look like they're going to flex it. They're just going to let it roll. Big Noon must have some kind of blackmail on somebody, because they're like, game of the year, you're getting played at noon. Man, that's a bummer. That's a real bummer. guess I'm getting up early though to watch it because that's going to be an awesome game. So I just my tagline on that one is expect fireworks on offense. I know Ohio State's defense is a little bit better. I think I see this game a little bit like I think it was the Georgia Alabama game. It started a little slow, kind of feeling each other out. I think by the second half, it's going to be some big plays, both teams taking shots. Indiana plays a fast pace type of offense. I think even against a good defense, you can keep them on their heels a little bit. So I expect points and fireworks. And I saw Signetti got a 8-year, I think $72 million contract today. Like it's gonna be hyped. And I honestly, my dream scenario was we've been driving the Indiana bandwagon, and my dream scenario was Oregon loses today, Indiana beats Ohio State, and Indiana goes into the playoffs as the 1 seed, as just like the ultimate, like Cinderella and Juggernaut at the same time. Like that would have just been incredible. So I'm really excited, probably more as a fan than fantasy football, but I expect fantasy football fireworks on both sides. Yeah,
I have something to say on that. Real quick. I know we got to roll.
Yeah.
If there are any players from Indiana watching out of the 68 that are watching, score. If there's anything that I've noticed about Ohio State over the past few weeks here, I mean, Northwestern scored first today. They scored 7, and then Ohio State blew them out. So Indiana, if you want to have a chance in this game, score all your points as soon as possible, because once Ohio State gets warmed up, they are hard to stop. So I'm excited for that game, but unless Indiana starts fast, it's not going to be as close as I think a lot of people think. So
yeah, especially in Ohio State, in the shoe. Yeah, I'd agree with that. You hear teams talk all the time of playing from a lead is a lot better than playing from behind. So Miami is back. I know you were stressing this week. I didn't even save this. Oh, Wake Forest. So that's why I didn't even put the second half of the game on, because I knew it didn't really matter. So Wake Forest at home for Miami. Miami's back. You are going to be thrilled with all of your Miami guys once again next week. So you don't have to thank us, but thank your Miami guys next week when they get you to the championship game, hopefully. And that's pretty much all I got to say on that one. Is just, I know you were that's what I was going to say, is you were a little nervous this week because you didn't get the first round bye. You knew you had to get past this first matchup and with a bunch of guys on bye week, and so you did it. I would expect those guys to come back in droves next week.
Agreed. Restrepo, Jacoby George, Isaiah Horton, Damian Martinez. Yeah, Cam Ward, they're all good. I think they're going to eat.
Miami's had so many games this year where all of those guys eat. Like Martinez gets 2 touchdowns, Cam Ward throws for 4. Like that's, it's just, yeah, they're going to be back. They're good. That being said, I'm kind of an anti-Miami guy. Like I'm cheering hard for SMU and Clemson to win out and just to watch X and the world burn it down of, does Miami miss out on the playoffs? Because they're not currently set to play in the ACC championship game. So they're not, I know all those playoff brackets coming out show them there, but they're wrong. They're wrong. And Pittsburgh tried to do their darndest today, but if everything shakes out as it is, they will not. They might get in the playoff as an 11 seed. I can't. But again, if Clemson loses to SMU, I'm excited, man. I can't wait to see how this all shakes out. So
it's just, if Miami does not make it, it's going to be a travesty. I understand that there's no perfect playoff system, but my goodness, the way Miami has played, I know they lost to Georgia Tech. The way they've played and the studs that they have on offense and defense, the playoff will not be as good without Miami. So that's all I'll say.
I'll tell you after the show, but
you don't want to tell me right now? There's only 68 people.
68 Russian bots. Is anybody out there? Can anybody verify?
Is anybody out there?
Is anybody out there? Can you verify that you're a real human? Leave us a comment.
Any questions?
Any question. Honestly, if you comment, I can tell you. I'll say what I was just laughing at. If somebody comments on
If someone comments
X, or it's not inappropriate. It was just funny. So yeah, somebody comment, and if you want to find out what Kevin was laughing about, show us that there are not 68 Russian bots, but I have my doubts.
There very well may be.
I think Elon. I think that they're Russian bots. All right, so let's move it along here. Kansas versus Colorado. Tagline: expect points of all kinds. We've talked about this. Big 12. Kansas, what is that score at right now? I think it was tied 10-10. Looks like
13-10 BYU.
Yeah, if Kansas loses tonight, they're going to be even more motivated to spoil for Colorado. So that game is in. Let me find it. Okay, that game is in Kansas. Yeah, I just think it's going to be a good game. It doesn't show it on your. I think it'll be closer than what the records would say, and so I do think Colorado comes out on top. But I expect points to be scored in that game, and I think Kansas has a better offense. Hey, there we go, Michael Keating. He wants to know what I was laughing at. No. He traded Davante Adams for Mike Evans. Thoughts? You want to take that first? Is this a dynasty league?
I don't want to take it because you're our NFL. You're our in-house NFL guy. So I think you should take this.
I'm gonna see dynasty or redraft. I'm guessing redraft. Any other compensation?
Wow. Michael Keating is a real human. Welcome, Michael.
Yeah. So straight up, man, what are they? They're the same age.
Hey.
What?
You need to tell us what you were laughing about, and then you can answer that question.
All right, I'll say first. So shout out Michael for showing us that there's real people out there. We're up to 70, so we know 69 Russian bots, and we got Michael. I looked over. I just turned the UFC fight on, and like I love UFC, and so like I look over, and he's just like hammer fisting the guy's head like on repeat, and they haven't even stopped the fight yet. But I looked over, and I was like, oh my gosh, like this is incredible, man. So that's all. It just made me laugh to like turn it on right to that point where it's like, man, this dude's just getting pummeled. So it's a Oliveira. He's a good fight. Anyway, that's not why Michael. So what I was going to look up here. Give me 1 second here, Michael, to pull up these guys' age. I don't see any other draft compensation. So Evans is hurt this year. You see the buzz of Rodgers coming back this year, and so I'll say redraft first. If it's redraft, I think it's pretty obvious. Davante Adams, just because that hamstring injury was pretty gnarly, and it just soft tissue issues can be re-aggravated. So if it's just a redraft this year, give me Davante Adams. Long term, let's see, Mike Evans, 31 years old, has a good rapport with Baker. Davante Adams is 31 years old and with Aaron Rodgers. In a dynasty, though, I'm taking Mike Evans over Davante Adams. Reason being, Mike Evans is just so underrated. He's been so good for so long, and I think his skill set continues to. He's never been like an explosive. He does get deep catches, but it's not always like, hey, I'm wide open by 30 yards. Like, he's a big body. He goes up, he makes the catches, and he's so consistent. I also think, I hope Godwin gets back on the Bucs. All is well, but there's a little more clear pecking order in that offense where the Jets, I just think, are a mess. And so I traded Davante Adams for Mike Evans. So you got Mike Evans in this deal, Michael. I think you should be happy about that. Again, I'm assuming that's dynasty. In dynasty, I'd be happy to have Evans. I'd be curious if there's any other compensation in that trade. I'm always intrigued at the wide receiver for wide receiver trades, like just or running back for running back, just similar tiered players. Just kind of what you're positioning on that. But yeah, I would say I'd go Mike Evans in Dynasty. How about that? Does that line up with you? I mean, you deem me the NFL guy, but you're also pretty NFL savvy yourself. So
Well, I think I would be on the Mike Evans side as well. I think they're both names that even people that don't watch the NFL probably recognize those names. I was just pulling up some quick stats. They both have been in the NFL for 11 seasons, and Mike Evans until this year has not dipped below 200 fantasy points in a year. And so I think that he is the picture of consistency. And that's what I hear from other fantasy football podcasts or players, people that follow. Like Mike Evans is just a consistent guy. And Devontae Adams is an absolute stud, but depending on where he's at, you may or may not be happy with the result.
Sounds good.
That's it.
I think that's it. Oh, here we go. We had Florida Ole Miss was our last matchup for next week.
You want me to take that?
Yeah. Go ahead. Why don't you take that one?
I'm going to take that one. So, Ole Miss last week beat Georgia. It was the biggest win of Lane Kiffin's career, I think, whether at Ole Miss or anywhere else. And so, big win. Congratulations. Don't want to take that away from them. Florida shows some real heart and grit today. I think that game is going to be a lot closer. I think that Lane Kiffin and the Ole Miss Rebels have been I think they're going to take that game a little too lightly after beating Georgia. I don't know that they're as grounded as Florida is. And so I actually think Florida might win that game. And I actually don't know if that's in Oxford or where that game is at, but I think that's going to be going to be a pretty close game. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think closer than I looked it up today. I mean, it just happened recently, but Ole Miss was the second loss for Georgia. I just think that the SEC is always tricky, even when teams aren't as good. Not even the Vandy upsets, but like just these blue bloods of the SEC. It's going to be a slugfest, and I expect fantasy points all around from those teams. Again, it might not be high scoring, but I do still think that Dart's going to throw a couple touchdowns. Trey Harris, do we know what's the deal on the Trey Harris train? That'd be interesting for people to know. Not that we have any insider intel on him, but just the latest that I can see. So he was on bye week this week. He was dealt in our league a couple weeks ago, and that guy's got to be not thrilled. Lower body spotted warming up. So he was a game time decision on the 9th. Doubtful to play, and then they had a bye week this week. So game time decision, I'd expect Trey Harris back. And if he is back, I think maybe it's not as close as you think. I think Ole Miss could run away with that. If they don't have Trey Harris, then I think definitely I'd agree with you on it's going to stay pretty close. So, all right, very good, man. Well, I think that's all we got for tonight. We got John Jones fight about to start here in a second. Again, that's why I was chuckling. Just Olivier just getting hammer fisted like a beast. We're not a UFC show, so just a slight rabbit trail there. Again, we are the Sideline Podcast. Waiver wires will be coming out tomorrow. More information on those guys. If you haven't been following, check out our Miffed Mondays. Just who are the guys that let you down over the weekend? Little chance to. The internet is a beautiful place of everybody airing their grievances. So that's really what it's all about. Is hey, if you're miffed that you didn't win and you're out of the playoffs, let us know. And then, again, next week we'll be on Saturday. Man, I almost want to do it during the Ohio State-Indiana game, but I guess we'll just watch that and we'll do this evening hour. Seems to work out pretty well for us. So usually on Saturdays around 8 p.m. We're we're going live on YouTube and X. You can follow me at TSP_Kevin. You can follow Booker, TSP_Booker, Sideline FF Pod, everywhere else. Yeah, thanks for joining us. Hope you guys have a good rest of your weekend. And again, it's fantasy football. Let's not be ragged on people on the internet. They have real lives. They have families. It is a bummer when you lose, but there's always next year, especially in Campus Canton, especially in Dynasty. You always got another chance at it. So let's not be just going after people on the internet because they lost your fake football game. So that'll be my rant for the day. Until next time.
All right.